in-between phase of my life. I had just graduated and didn't yet have any real responsibilities. My full-time job wouldn't start until June, and all my friends were still finishing their semesters. For the first time, I had too much free time and absolutely nothing to do with it. At first, that sounded great. No classes, no assignments, no deadlines. But after a few weeks, the boredom started to rot me from the inside. That's when my mom asked for a small favor. She wanted me to drive down to my Uncle Rick's beach house in Delaware to check on things, make sure nothing was leaking or damaged. It was an easy task. The house was huge, built for big family gatherings, and usually packed every summer with aunts, uncles, cousins, and enough board games to last a lifetime. So I agreed. The drive wasn't bad, just a little over 2 hours from Pennsylvania. I left in the late afternoon, maybe around 4. The sky was dimming, and I figured I'd make it before dark. When I got there, the neighborhood was quiet. No tourists yet, no families out walking. Just a few houses nestled between tall beach grass and narrow, winding roads. The house looked fine from the outside. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by still air and the faint smell of sea salt. It was strange being there alone. Usually, that place was full of noise and laughter, but now it felt hollow. I walked through each room, checking faucets, breakers, and windows. Everything looked perfectly normal, maybe too normal. As I moved from room to room, I couldn't help feeling watched. It wasn't paranoia exactly, more like the uneasy silence had a presence of its own. The walls seemed to hold on to old voices, faint echoes from past summers. By the time I finished the checklist, it was getting dark. I hate driving at night, so I texted my mom to let her know I'd stay over and head home in the morning. She told me that was a good idea and to thank Rick for letting me stay. I made something quick to eat, scrolled my phone for a while, and decided to crash in the master bedroom, a room I'd never been allowed to use before. That night, it was mine. I climbed into the master bed around midnight, the sound of distant waves faint through the window. The house was silent, too silent. It was a kind of quiet I wasn't used to, the kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I remember thinking how strange it was to have this giant beach house all to myself. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it, a soft thump coming from the closet. My heart jumped into my throat. It sounded small, like something had fallen, maybe a hanger or a shoe. I tried convincing myself it was nothing, but the sound had felt deliberate somehow, like someone trying not to be heard. I lay perfectly still, eyes wide open, staring at the closet door. My body refused to move. It wasn't paralysis exactly, more like my mind was screaming at me to stay frozen. Every shadow in the room looked darker, heavier. I told myself to close my eyes, to ignore it, to sleep. Then I heard it again. Another dull, muffled sound from behind the closet door. My pulse pounded in my ears. This time, it wasn't random, it was slower, heavier. Suddenly, I couldn't move at all. This time it was real paralysis, a total lock on my body. I could only watch through half-open eyes as the closet door slowly creaked open. Someone stepped out. A dark figure. Its outline was sharp against the faint moonlight filtering through the window. It stood there, just a few feet from my bed, motionless. Watching. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It only stood there, like it was waiting for something. My lungs burned as I forced myself to breathe quietly. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. After what felt like forever, maybe 20 seconds, the figure silently turned and walked away. The footsteps were soft, careful, and wrong. Instead of heading downstairs, they moved up, toward the 3rd floor. That's when it hit me, there was no way out from up there. No exit, no second staircase. Just old, locked rooms. My skin went cold as the sound of those footsteps disappeared above me. I lay awake until dawn, too scared to move, praying the light would come faster. The moment I saw the first hint of morning light, I finally dared to move. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. It was 5:12 a.m. I barely slept a minute after whatever had happened the night before. The memory of those slow footsteps going upstairs replayed in my head over and over. My chest felt tight. I wanted to believe it was a dream, but the creaking floorboards were still real in my mind. That sound was no dream. By sunrise, I made up my mind. I called 911. My voice trembled as I told the dispatcher that someone had broken into the house. They told me to stay inside, lock myself in a room, and wait for officers to arrive. I did just that. I locked the bedroom door again, sitting against it with my knees pulled up to my chest. It felt like forever, but in less than 15 minutes, red and blue lights flashed across the window. I ran down the stairs, opened the front door, and nearly cried when I saw two officers step out of their cruiser. They didn't waste time. They went in immediately, sweeping the rooms with flashlights. I waited on the front porch, arms wrapped around myself, trying to calm down. After a few minutes, one of them came back. "There's no one here," he said. I just stared at him. "That's not possible," I said. I heard him. He went upstairs. There's nowhere to go from there. He exchanged a look with his partner. Maybe he slipped out before we arrived. You were scared, half asleep. It's easy to miss something like that. But I knew they were wrong. I hadn't imagined that sound. The man was in this house. Somewhere. I wasn't satisfied. I called Uncle Rick and told him everything. His voice exploded through the speaker. "Tell those cops to check again," he barked. "Don't let them leave until they search every inch of that house. Do you hear me?" The officers reluctantly agreed to do another sweep. This time I followed. My legs were trembling as we went room by room. They opened closets, checked under beds, tapped the walls, even pulled back the shower curtains. That's when one of them called out, "Hey, this window's unlocked." It was on the 3rd floor, the same one the footsteps had gone to. The moment the officer pointed to that unlocked window, a chill crawled down my spine. The 3rd floor wasn't used much. It was an old attic that Uncle Rick had converted into storage years ago. None of us ever went up there. The officer turned to me. "Did you leave this open?" I shook my head immediately. "No, I never even go up there." He exchanged a silent glance with his partner before pushing the creaky window open. Cold morning air poured in. A faint smell of rain and something metallic drifted through the opening. He leaned out carefully, flashlight cutting through the early dawn haze. "Jesus," he whispered. "There are footprints." I moved closer despite the officer's warning. On the slanted roof, I could see it. A line of muddy footprints trailing toward the far edge, where a drain pipe ran down the side of the house. Someone had used it to climb down. The second officer muttered, "That's a hell of a drop." Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. I felt sick. The realization hit me like a wave. Someone had been in the house all night, watching me, moving just beyond sight. And they'd escaped right before dawn. As they examined the prints, I noticed something odd. The footprints weren't fresh. They weren't from last night's storm. They were slightly faded, as if they'd been there for days. I told the officers that, but one of them shrugged. Could be from before. Maybe a worker or someone who used the roof recently. But no one had been up there for months. Not since the last renovation. When they finally left, I stayed standing in that room, staring out the window at the rooftops beyond. The world outside looked normal again. Kids walking to school, a jogger on the sidewalk, sunlight spilling over the trees. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been in that house never really left. That night, I tried to sleep again, leaving every light on. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft click, the sound of that same 3rd-floor window creaking open in the wind. Or maybe not the wind. I froze in bed, breath held, listening. And then, faintly, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs this time. My friend Mike owned a beach house on the Jersey Shore. To me, it was stunning, way beyond anything I'd ever lived in. Maybe that's why I always looked at it with awe. Mike's family had owned it for generations. His grandparents tried to make it their permanent home before they passed away. Since then, the place sat mostly empty. Mike's relatives lived on the West Coast, and his parents rarely had the time to use it. The result? A beautiful, silent house waiting for someone to fill it with life again. That's when Mike hit me up one afternoon in mid-July. He asked if I wanted to come down for the weekend. I didn't need convincing. The thought of spending a few days at the beach, free of stress and noise, sounded perfect. His plan was simple. Hang out, maybe hit the beach during the day, then chill on the boardwalk at night. It wasn't about parties or crowds, just relaxation. I said yes instantly. That Friday, I packed a bag, tossed it into his trunk, and we hit the road. The drive was smooth, about 2 hours, filled with dumb jokes and old playlists. When we arrived, it was around 6 in the evening. The house had that familiar coastal scent, a mix of salt, sand, and aging wood. Not unpleasant, just nostalgic. You could tell generations of summers had happened here. We grabbed sandwiches from a local sub shop, then decided to walk the beach as the sun set. Mike had brought fishing rods, so we set up near the waterline. It wasn't about catching anything. It was about being there, letting the cool air wrap around us. At one point, we crossed paths with two girls about our age, walking barefoot along the shoreline. Mike, being Mike, started talking to them immediately. They were local, friendly, and laughing came easy. We exchanged numbers and went our separate ways, feeling that summer night energy that only exists near the ocean. Later, we found a quiet stretch of sand to ourselves. The night air was calm, the waves gentle. Everything felt still and safe. If I had known what would happen the next night, I would have cherished that peace more than anything. The next morning, sunlight was already spilling through the blinds when I woke up. The salty breeze drifted through the open window, and for a few seconds, everything felt perfect. Mike and I decided to go for a jog along the boardwalk, just to soak in that early morning energy. It was already warm, but the wind coming off the ocean made it bearable. The smell of fried dough and sunscreen lingered faintly in the air, even though most of the shops were still closed. After a quick breakfast, we spent the day relaxing, lounging in the sand, talking about nothing in particular, and letting the hours slip away. There was something strangely comforting about how peaceful the day felt. By the time evening rolled around, we were both exhausted. Mike suggested hitting a few bars later that night, but we were too drained to move. So, instead, we ordered some takeout, watched a bit of TV, and crashed early. Sometime after midnight, a sharp, shrill noise tore me out of sleep. It wasn't just loud, it was piercing, like a smoke detector on overdrive. My first thought was that it had to be a dream, but the sound didn't fade. It was real, heart pounding. I sat up in the dark, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It didn't sound like it was on the second floor. It was coming from above me, from the third floor. Without thinking, I threw open my bedroom door and ran to Mike's room. "Mike, wake up. Something's beeping upstairs." He blinked groggily, then shot out of bed, following me barefoot into the hallway. The third floor was pitch dark except for a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the far window. The beeping was relentless, echoing down the hall. We flicked on the lights and started checking every corner, still half asleep, still expecting smoke or the smell of something burning. But there was nothing. No fire, no smell, no flicker of danger, just that deafening alarm. Finally, after a few agonizing minutes, I found the source. Inside one of the bedrooms, hidden neatly under a pillow, was a small black device. It looked like a walkie-talkie, no brand, no label, just a single red light blinking on top. I hesitated, then flipped the small switch on its side. Instantly, the noise stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. Mike came into the room just as I turned off the device. His eyes darted between me and the thing in my hand. Neither of us said a word for a few seconds. The silence was tense, uncomfortable. The only sound was the soft hum of the ceiling fan above us. Finally, Mike asked, "What is that?" His voice cracked a little, like he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. I told him I had no idea. It wasn't a smoke detector. It wasn't even connected to the house wiring. It looked like something you'd see in a spy movie. All black, smooth casing, one tiny blinking red light, and that single switch. No buttons, no speakers, no markings. It shouldn't have been there. Mike rubbed the back of his neck. "I've never seen that thing before," he said. "My parents haven't been here in months. No one has." I believed him. The house didn't look like anyone had lived in it for a while. There was dust on some of the furniture and a faint musty smell that beach houses get when left closed too long. We spent the next hour trying to come up with explanations. Maybe one of his uncles had stopped by and forgot some kind of gadget. Maybe it was a malfunctioning carbon monoxide detector. None of the theories fit. There was no reason for a device like that to be under a pillow on the third floor. As the confusion turned to unease, I grabbed the device again and stared at it. There was something strange about how deliberately it was placed, not tossed or forgotten, but hidden. I flipped the switch back on. The shrill beeping immediately started again, echoing through the house. My stomach twisted. I turned it off again. Mike looked at me, his face pale. "Wait," he whispered. "You have to use your hand to flip it, right?" I nodded slowly. That's when it hit both of us at the same time. The switch wasn't motion or sound activated. It had to be turned on by someone. Someone had physically done it. The realization drained the warmth from the air. Mike grabbed his phone, hands shaking, and called the police. I ran to his room and locked the door behind us, shoving a dresser against it for good measure. Every creak of the old beach house suddenly felt louder, closer. We waited in silence for what felt like hours, counting every faint sound until flashing red and blue lights finally broke through the windows. The sound of sirens outside was the biggest relief I'd ever felt. Mike and I ran down the stairs, yelling that the cops were here. We waited just inside the front door until two officers entered, flashlights drawn, calm but alert. Mike quickly explained everything: the beeping, the black device, and how we were sure someone else had been in the house. The officers told us to stay put while they checked each floor. We stood in the living room, trying not to make a sound, our nerves on fire. From above, we heard heavy footsteps moving from room to room, doors creaking open, drawers slamming shut. After about 15 minutes, one of the officers called down to the other, and then both came back downstairs. "There's no one in the house," one said flatly. I blinked. "That's impossible. Someone had to flip that switch." The second officer frowned. "Every window upstairs was open," he said slowly. "All of them. Even the small bathroom ones." Mike and I looked at each other, speechless. The officer continued, "The rooms are trashed. Drawers pulled out, furniture overturned. Looks like someone was searching for something." We followed them upstairs to see for ourselves. My stomach dropped. The room where I'd found the black device was completely destroyed. The bed was flipped, sheets scattered across the floor, and the pillow where the device had been was ripped open. It made no sense. We had just been in that room before the police arrived, and it had been spotless. The officers found no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no weapons. Just chaos. After another 20 minutes of checking everything, they advised us to lock all doors and windows and call if anything else happened. Then, just like that, they left. Mike and I stood there, frozen. The house felt heavier now, suffocating almost. I could tell from his face he was trying to stay calm, but he was terrified. We decided to barricade the front and back doors and crash in the same room until sunrise. Neither of us slept. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like someone breathing just outside the window. When the first light of morning finally hit, we didn't waste a second. We packed our stuff, locked up, and left. The drive home was dead silent. Mike stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the wheel tight enough to make his knuckles white. Later that week, he called to tell me his dad had gone to the house with a locksmith. Every window was still locked this time. But the black device? It was gone. No one had touched it, yet it vanished. We never went back after that. This happened a few years back when I was 22. Enough time has passed that I finally feel comfortable talking about it. I was fresh out of college, with a good job and no real expenses, since I was still living at home with my parents. Imagine that, saving money while having a warm bed, home-cooked meals, and a house full of memories. I had my childhood room, my own car, and all the comforts I'd grown up with. Life was smooth and stable. Honestly, I knew how lucky I was. Not everyone is parents who let their adult kids live rent-free. But what I didn't know was how quickly that peace could vanish. What happened less than a month after I moved back home would change how I saw safety, friendship, and trust forever. I've never been what people would call a party girl. I don't get drunk, I don't chase guys, and I've never been into the whole hookup scene. That's just not me. My father raised me to respect myself, and I've always believed in that. My life was routine, but in a comforting way. Wake up, grab coffee, go to work, hit the gym, read a few chapters before bed, and scroll through my phone till I fell asleep. On weekends, I'd hike, go on small road trips, or just relax with friends. It was a calm, predictable life, and I liked it that way. But that weekend changed everything. My college best friend, Lindsay, called me out of the blue with an invitation. She wanted me and our two closest friends, Sabrina and Thea, to spend a few days at her family's beach house. I'd never been, but from how she described it, the place sounded like a dream. Private, quiet, right on the sand, far from any tourist crowds. Her family was wealthy. Both her parents were neurosurgeons, so I figured it would be incredible, and I was right. When we arrived, I was in awe. The house looked like something out of an architectural magazine, sleek, ultra-modern, glass walls reflecting the ocean light. It felt more like a secret coastal fortress than a vacation home. Inside, every room was spotless and elegant. We unpacked and decided we'd all share one of the kids' rooms with 2 bunk beds instead of splitting up. For friends, 1 room. It felt nostalgic, like a grown-up sleepover. We laughed, unpacked, and poured our first drinks as the sun dipped behind the horizon. That night, under a sky full of stars, everything still felt safe. The first night at Lindsay's beach house started out calm, almost magical. The four of us brought down a small cooler, a Bluetooth speaker, and a few cans of White Claw. We sat in the soft sand, toes buried beneath it, watching the stars shimmer over the waves. The sound of the ocean was steady and peaceful, and for the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed. Sabrina played some chill house music, Lindsay passed around drinks, and for a while, we just laughed and talked about nothing. That's when Sabrina noticed it, a faint flickering light far down the shoreline. At first, we thought it was a lantern or a campfire, but the light was too sharp, too directed. It was moving. We all squinted, watching as the light swayed back and forth, closer and closer. It didn't take long for us to realize it was a flashlight, someone walking toward us. The movement wasn't frantic, though. Whoever it was, they were strolling casually, as if they had all the time in the world. "There's more than one," Thea whispered. She was right. As our eyes adjusted, we could make out 3, maybe 4, figures moving together, their laughter barely audible over the waves. The sound was oddly normal, even friendly, which made us relax a little. A male voice called out, "Hey there." It was friendly, confident, maybe a little too casual. Thea waved back and shouted, "Hey." When they got close enough to see, they turned out to be 3 guys, maybe a year or 2 older than us. Tan skin, salt-streaked hair, dressed like every other beach guy you'd expect to see. They sat down a few feet away, beers in hand, and we started chatting. It all felt harmless. They weren't pushy, weren't creepy, just chill. I could see Thea's interest immediately. She's the kind of girl guys notice, and she loved the attention. The rest of us went along with it, laughing, drinking, and telling stories. The ocean air felt warm, the stars bright, and time blurred together. Eventually, one of the guys suggested we head back to their beach rental. Thea's eyes lit up. I, on the other hand, was exhausted and ready to call it a night. Lindsay and Sabrina hesitated, but Thea's excitement was contagious. After a short debate, I told them to go ahead without me. "I'll see you guys in the morning," I said. I didn't realize that was the last normal moment of the entire trip. I got back to Lindsay's beach house alone, a little tipsy, but mostly just tired. The sound of the ocean followed me as I walked up the wooden path from the sand to the back deck. Inside, the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I rinsed the salt off my feet, changed into pajamas, and crawled into one of the lower bunks. The room was still warm from the day, and the sound of waves outside lulled me to sleep almost instantly. I don't remember what time I woke up exactly, sometime after 3 a.m. My phone was buzzing beside me, vibrating so hard it nearly fell off the nightstand. The screen lit up. "Lindsay, FaceTime incoming." My heart skipped. Why would she be calling me this late? Half asleep, I answered. The second her face appeared, I could tell something was horribly wrong. She was outside, the wind whipping her hair, and her voice was shaking. Get up right now," she screamed. "Thea and Sabrina, they've been kidnapped. Get my car. Hurry." For a second, my brain couldn't process what she was saying. It didn't make sense. Kidnapped? My stomach twisted. I sat straight up, fully awake now, adrenaline already kicking in. "What are you talking about?" I yelled. "Where are you?" She was sobbing now, barely coherent. "I saw them. Those guys from the beach. They threw them into a car. You need to get my car right now. I already called the police." I stumbled to my feet, yanking on jeans and a hoodie with trembling hands. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I ran down the stairs barefoot, still clutching my phone, listening to Lindsay's panicked voice in my ear. Okay, I kept saying, trying to steady my breathing. "What car? Where did they go?" "They drove off down the beach road," she said. "About 10 houses down from us. Please hurry." I found her car keys on the counter, sprinted to the driveway, and jumped in. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the keys twice before finally starting the engine. The tires screeched as I tore out of the driveway. The world outside was dark, the road nearly empty. The only light came from my headlights and the moon reflecting off the ocean. Lindsay stayed on the phone, guiding me, her voice breaking every few seconds. Then, far ahead, I saw it, taillights. A dark SUV, crawling down the road like it had nowhere to be. My heart froze. The red taillights shimmered faintly through the mist, cutting across the narrow beach road. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, the engine growling as Lindsay's voice shook through my phone speaker. "That's them. That's the car," she screamed. "Don't lose them, please." The SUV swerved slightly, like whoever was driving noticed me following. My pulse hammered as I kept a careful distance, headlights dimmed. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. Every instinct in my body screamed to stop, but adrenaline and panic overpowered reason. They turned. I hissed, watching the SUV veer off onto a dirt trail that led toward the dunes. "Lindsay, what do I do?" "Keep going," she shouted, her voice distant, breaking up. "Police are on their way." The dirt path jostled the car violently, sand kicking up into the headlights. My vision blurred from fear and motion. The SUV ahead was slowing down now, its taillights glowing faintly through the haze, until, suddenly, they went out. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. Dust and sand filled the air. For a moment, I saw nothing, just darkness and the faint roar of the waves. Then, slowly my eyes adjusted. The road ended at a dead stretch of beach. No car. No people. Nothing. "Lindsay," I whispered, voice trembling. "It's gone. They're gone." "What?" she screamed. "No, they couldn't have. You're right behind them." "I swear," I said, stepping out of the car. The cold night air slapped me across the face. My bare feet sank into damp sand. There were tire tracks, but they ended abruptly, like the car had vanished into thin air. No skid marks, no footprints. No sound except the ocean's endless rhythm. "Lindsay, where are you right now?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then a faint voice, not from the phone, but behind me. "Who are you talking to?" I froze. The phone slipped from my hand, landing softly in the sand. I turned slowly, heart thundering. A figure stood at the edge of the dunes, motionless, featureless in the fog. "Lindsay," I whispered. The figure tilted its head slightly. No answer. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of the ocean growing louder, so loud it drowned out the world. When I woke up, it was morning. The car was still there. The phone was still half buried in the sand. But there were no tire tracks anymore. No footprints. And no sign of Lindsay.